Welcome to the MS-Perspektive podcast. Perspective with a K, as I'm German. I'm Nele Handwerker, MS patient, patient advocate and author. I'm bringing you interviews, inspiration and information about living with multiple sclerosis and show you ways how you can positively influence the disease and make the best out of your diagnosis. On ms-perspektive.com, you will find the show notes, 11 free tips as a PDF, and lots of other information. And now the show begins.
This podcast is supported by Mid-Mission, a project of the nonprofit Hvid Foundation.
Welcome to episode number 36, Rehabilitation in MS, or shortly RIMS, an interview with Dr. Lars Hvid about the scope and project. Lars is Associate Professor and Senior Researcher at Aarhus University and Communication Officer at RIMS in Denmark. And now the interview begins. Hello, Lars. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today and a warm welcome to Denmark.
Thank you very much, Nele. I'm very happy to be here and hopefully I can shed some light on the RIMS organization here.
I'm sure you can. And before we actually start with the interview, it would be lovely if you could introduce yourself to the audience so they know who is with me today on the podcast.
Yes, my name is Lars Hvid. I'm an associate professor at Aarhus University in Denmark, working at the exercise biology department. I work together with Professor Ulrik Dalgas, if people know his name, and yes, we mostly work on exercise and MS at the Aarhus University. In addition to that, I'm also a senior researcher at the Danish MS Rehabilitation hospitals. So these are two hospitals we have in Denmark where you can be referred to as an MS patient and go and receive multidisciplinary rehabilitation depending on whatever goals and aims you have. So that's where I work now. My background is actually I'm an exercise physiologist. So I started working a lot with some of the exercise studies. Started working in aging research, and then in 2017 I moved into MS research, and that's the only thing I work on these days. That is MS.
We are quite a big group, so I guess you won't be it won't be boring. So, what was your personal motivation to go in that direction?
Well, I think actually when I did study sports science or the exercise physiology, I actually wanted to. I didn't really want to work with athletes. I really wanted to work with like patients or individuals that could gain something from improving their physical function through exercise, and that's why I quite early on started working in the aging area. So in older individuals, when you also experience a lot of some of the same symptoms actually that you see in MS. You see impairments in walking performance, cognitive performance, fatigue, and so on. So that was more my motivation, that I could actually bring some knowledge to the table that could help people in their everyday life, instead of a more luxury type of world that is the sports scene. And that's also what motivates me today, that I can really contribute, hopefully, with research that can play a small part in improving aspects of the lives of MS patients.
Absolutely, and for us it feels so important to be active and not just take medication, but to be actually active. I really love that part of my life with MS. So let's go a bit into the details of RIMS. RIMS is for Rehabilitation and Multiple Sclerosis. What is a RIMS network and why was it founded in the first place?
Well, it was founded now more than 30 years ago, I think 32 years, something like that, back in the start 90s. And the idea was actually to bring together researchers and practitioners across the MS rehabilitation field to share knowledge and to help each other to improve whatever rehab we are offering MS patients. And that was the goal when it started, and it's still actually one of the primary goals of the organization. So the RIMS organization itself represent a lot of different healthcare professionals, researchers, and patient organizations from different settings. So the aim of the RIMS organization is to enhance activity, participation, autonomy of persons with MS. And the way we do that, or try to do that, is to develop and advocate for evidence-based rehabilitation.
Yes, very.
So, and of course, I would say that the long-term goal in that sense is that people with MS across Europe, across the world, can have access to evidence-based rehabilitation when they need it.
Yeah. And I always like that quote that sports or exercise is the best, let's say, disease-modifying treatment without more or less any side effects, negative side effects.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is actually, there's an abundance of evidence supporting that, not just in MS, but across a lot of different populations, also in the general, for everybody. And it is, well, you could see it as some sort of a multimodal medication, because it has so many beneficial effects. It affects your cardiovascular system, your neuromuscular system, your nervous system, your bones and stuff like so. So there's so much, but also your mood, of course. So it affects a lot of stuff going on in the brain, and that's of course where it becomes very interesting when you talk about MS. But that said, I would say that when you talk about the RIMS organization itself, rehabilitation is of course much broader than just exercise or physical rehabilitation. It could also be cognitive rehabilitation. It could be speech therapy. So there's so many different areas to address in the rehabilitation. That's also why it's extremely complex. And I think one of the ideas about the RIMS is also to bring together that complexity and try to share knowledge to understand some of the complexity that an MS patient can, each MS patient can be in a quite complex situation sometimes, having different problems that they want to work with and address.
Absolutely.
So that is the idea of the RIMS, to be as broad as possible in that sense.
Sounds good. Can you maybe give us a little insight in how the RIMS network is organized and how does the exchange takes place? I mean, it's a lot of countries.
Yeah, we have a lot of countries. Well, historically, it was actually founded as a European organization, and I know it's still called the RIMS on the webpage and stuff like that. And it was originated from it originated in Belgium. That the RIMS organization was registered in Belgium. So there is still a rule that you have to have Belgians in the board in that sense. But the idea now is actually that we don't really see it as a European network. We see it as a worldwide network. So we really try to bridge and invite people across the world to come and join this network. And we don't really see other type of networks addressing rehabilitation from a researcher and practitioner point of view in MS. So and to some of the conferences, we do have Americans coming, we do have Australians coming, people from Israel. So we have a lot of countries outside Europe, but it can of course evolve much more than that. And in addition to that, there are also some European countries that are not that's strongly represented in the RIMS organization. And then that may be cultural differences, it may be tradition, it may also be something about money and funding, because of course, if you go to, the way it's organized is that each year we have a conference where you can join in and present some of the work you're doing, and you can get feedback, and there's a lot of networking, of course. That's one of the main goals of the conference as well. So that's one of the activities that we have that has a lot of focus, of course. In addition to that, we have these special interest groups, the SIGs, where we address more let's say specific, depending on the practitioners or researchers' background. It could be physiotherapy, occupational therapy, neuropsychology, exercise physiology, and stuff like that. So we try to broaden these areas a little bit more out and do specific meetings each year. And for these SIG meetings, we just had the SIG
occupational one, I think.
Yes, exactly.
I saw it on LinkedIn.
SIG occupation. There was a joint SIG with the SIG psychology and neuropsychology in Hakadal in Norway. So they tried to to bridge these topics about some of the psychological aspects, occupational aspects, in terms of more vocational rehabilitation. So how can you have the best work-life balance as an MS patient? So that was just to give an example, that you try to join forces, because sometimes it makes sense to do the SIG alone, like the SIG mobility. Then you talk a lot about exercise, for instance, and how does an exercise intervention work and stuff like that. So you can go very detailed into one area of the rehab setting, but of course, when you want to address the patient, as a complete person and having different types of problems, then you need a multidisciplinary team to address that. So one thing is you have a neurologist and you have nurses that can help provide medication, but on the other hand, you also need physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and psychologists to address some of the other aspects that the medication does not necessarily work on that efficiently. So you need the multidisciplinary team to address the problems. That I think that's also what MS patients encounter and experience, of course, that they meet a lot of different backgrounds of researchers and practitioners.
Yes, which is good and interesting, and is important to have a fulfilling life despite MS. Oh. Can you maybe just list the 6 special interest groups, the so-called SIG for us, and just give a little bit insight why they were formed, or why you choose on these topics, even so sometimes you group them for special conferences or meetings.
Yes. Well, we have the SIG mobility that's mostly focusing on physical rehabilitation. We have SIG bladder, bowel, and sexuality that, of course, addresses issues about bladder, bowel, and sexuality. We have SIG psychology and neuropsychology that has a lot of focus on some of the cognitive rehabilitation or neuro psychological interventions. We have SIG communication and swallowing that addresses some of these issues. That is also a quite prevalent challenge or problem for MS patients. We have SIG occupation that is mostly targeting the occupational therapy area, and then you have SIG patient autonomy, about how people can independently live their lives and areas like that. So these are the 6 we have now. Historically, it started out with a little bit fewer, and then then we are now at these numbers, 2, 4, 6 different SIG groups, 6. And the reason why these developed is that based on the meetings we had in the RIMS organization, based on some of the conferences, based on the board meetings, it was using a lot of input from patient organizations and researchers and practitioners. It was decided some time ago that these were the areas that we wanted to address more in depth between the big RIMS conference. But that being said, it's not a fixed entity in that sense, because we are discussing all the time, should we add more SIGs? It could be, we are discussing right now whether we should have a SIG technology, for instance, because there is so much focus on applying new technology and approaches in the rehab setting. But of course, all of these SIGs are overlapping. That's for sure. None of them can stand alone. And the example with the technology is that in the SIG mobility, the physical rehabilitation, there's a lot of use of technology. So it's embedded in all the others, but it's more to give a chance to work directly into one area that is a little bit overlooked. And of course, I think also if there's a lot of interest in new SIGs, then the RIMS is very keen on listening to these ideas. That's for sure.
Sounds good. Yes, and digital stuff and technology is really getting interesting. And I think so far I did not focus on the English podcast, but on the German quite a lot. And yeah.
Well, there are some quite strong groups across Europe, across the world, that are really, trying to understand how we can use technology in the best way to improve it without without counteracting some of the good experiences we already have, the good evidence we already have about rehab. Yeah. So one thing is that it shouldn't be technology for the technology itself. It should be that it adds something extra to the rehab setting.
Absolutely.
That is sometimes, I think that is sometimes one issue that exists, that people are also excited by new technologies, but if it doesn't, I'm completely the same.
It looks so good.
Yeah, of course it does. It costs a lot, but we need the RIMS organization is really trying to push that we can do interventions or studies that provide evidence that it does add something extra.
Yeah. I use, for example, a tool for brain training, and I just had my neuropsychology test, and it was really good because training the brain is like exercising the muscles. It helps.
Oh, exactly.
For sure.
That is one example that has so many opportunities to advance even more. And of course, I think that the next step is also to make it accessible to everybody. That it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be costly. It should be easy to use, and it should be effective. Yeah. And these these are the same as traditional rehabilitation in that sense. But I think there's so much in the next 5-10 years that is one area that's going to
kind of explode.
Yeah. Exactly. But we have some pretty strong interests or collaborators in for the RIMS organization that are really spearheading that field. So we really try to put that on the agenda for the RIMS organizations as well, the RIMS conference. Mm-hmm. We had a complete session last year. We also have a complete session next year about the application of technology in rehab.
Sounds good. How do you try to bring best rehabilitation practices and new evidence-based data into the field so that every MS neurologist and therapist can use this knowledge and patients can benefit from it?
Yeah, of course, that is the ultimate goal. That is that the patients can benefit from it. That is the ultimate goal of the RIMS as well. Of course, the structure and organization of the RIMS is that we want to bring together researchers and practitioners. So the idea is also that when the researchers and practitioners meet together, the practitioners get an update and they can bring that knowledge back to their different rehab settings and integrate it in that way. In addition to that, we have a close collaboration with some of the large patient organizations, the MSIF, the EMSP, and we try to do some joint activities as well. We had a joint session at the last conference where we tried to raise some of the issues that the patient organizations wants to target in terms of research and developing practical rehabilitation. So we really try to do as much as we can in that sense. Of course, the patient involvement area is also a quite hot topic in right now, but it's something that all organizations needs to rethink a little bit. How can we improve the involvement of patients in deciding what we're doing and setting the mission, the vision, the strategies, and so on. And we are working on some of these aspects in the RIMS organization as well. So trying to advance that even more. So it's always a balance because I think we would like to keep the format of our conferences where you can meet up as researchers and practitioners, but the patient involvement, the presence of patients is also crucial for us to do the best type of rehab we can do.
Yeah, sounds good. Which informational resources exist for patients on the RIMS website?
Well, on the RIMS website, we have a news and events where you can actually read an updates and summaries of different activities that's been going on. We also have some summaries from the SIGs, the special interest group, when they've had annual meetings or between the conference meetings. And then in addition, we have some sort of an e-learning site where you have we do a lot of webinars, right? So each month, that's the plan at least. We try to set up a webinar where patients can meet up and not patients, but researchers, practitioners can meet up and discuss whatever topics that they find of interest. On Monday we have just an example. On Monday we have a webinar where we have a topic addressing how rehabilitation should be viewed and could be integrated in patients early diagnosed with MS. So newly diagnosed MS patients, how can we set up rehab for that population, and which problems are more prevalent than others, and stuff like that. So that's one other activity we have. They have these webinars, and we've also had some recordings from some of the conferences that are put on the website. So if you're interested in more the, let's say, scientific or practical point of view in terms of rehabilitation, then we have a lot of information on the site there. But of course, that's also one of the areas that we would like to advance even more. How can we, disseminate some of the knowledge that we gather on the conferences, that we collect on the conferences or the meetings, so that it can actually be accessible for patients as well. So that's one of the things that I think in the next 2, 3, 5 years is going to change a little bit more. But of course, the RIMS, we also need to remember the RIMS organization is purely based on voluntary work from researchers and practitioners. So all the time that they invest in that, that's also away from whatever work they have to do otherwise. So of course it's sometimes a little bit difficult to move that very fast. If we had a lot of money, of course it could go even faster and in a more professional setting. So we're trying to do as much as we can with the funding we have, but I think that's an issue for all these type of organizations like the RIMS.
Yeah, all these people are being involved are probably not bored by their normal job, but trying to do some additional on top in the evenings, on the weekends, whatsoever. And of course, everybody has a normal life besides work as well, so it can't be that fast.
Exactly, and I think those who are part of the RIMS, it's really because they want to make a difference. Right, so they invest a lot of spare time, say in that sense, to help do that. But so it's based on voluntary work mostly. But of course, we do have some funding for the RIMS organization. We do have some sponsors, but we would, as many others probably, would really like to advance that aspect as well, because that would make our opportunities much bigger in terms of doing, let's say, tools or setups that can provide more info for the patient, for instance.
Absolutely.
So the funding issue is always something that we work hard on to.
And a big thank you to everybody involved in putting all that extra effort into RIMS.
But also, of course, we are very happy with those who are funding some of the activities we have today. But of course, the difference between some of the, let's say, medications versus the rehab setting is that who are who has the incentive to invest in the rehab setting. Of course, we as researchers, practitioners, we find it interesting. The patient, of course, they find it of interest, but who is it that can gain something from a financial point of view? And that is something where
governments should be interested.
Exactly. In a system like Denmark, where we pay a lot of taxes, on the long, if you take a long-term perspective, like 5, 10, 15, 20 years, if you do rehab, then you have a much better trajectory, likely. And it would be much cheaper on the long run. And I think that is where some of the governments should try to invest a little bit more in that in that sense, in the long term. But of course, this can be a long discussion to go into, because it's a lot about politics, of course. But I think that is something that all rehab organizations are dealing with, RIMS as well. So, but we're pushing and we are trying to do as much as we can to find the funding to ensure that we can do the activities we want to do.
Very good. But just one more question on what you've mentioned. So the there's recordings of the conferences, and the webinars are open access. So I, as a patient, if I understand it and if it's not too difficult for me, I could join and watch it. And are there recordings of the webinars as well or not?
Yeah, there are recordings of the webinars. It's also something that we're working on. We're trying to, let's say, get sponsors that sponsor some of the webinars or some of the conference presentations. And if they do that, then we, of course, it should be free, accessible to everybody. But we have an ongoing discussion right now about should we have, in order to attract people to join the RIMS organization as well, then we sometimes want to have that you are a member to get access to some of these activities. But so it's a little bit of a challenge in that sense. So far, the webinars has been recorded and they're on the webpage and they're free of charge, as well as some of the conference presentations. But some of it may change a little bit in the coming future, perhaps, where we would require a membership. But of course, that is not ideal for a patient, because they do not necessarily want to be part of the RIMS organization in that sense, because they're not attending the conference and all of that. So it's always a balance in that sense. But the main goal should be that it should be free of charge, so the knowledge should be accessible to everybody.
Yeah, and I think probably it will go a bit in the direction of the big ACTRIMS meeting, where you have that highly sophisticated topics where you need to pay for, and the, let's say, more to the ground, more basic knowledge. They are kind of open access, at least if you join the conference, and there it would be a bit different. But okay, that makes sense. It's fine. I mean, you can't offer everything for free. That's
no, but I think it's a tough discussion, because if you talk about a researcher, or the only currency they have is knowledge. Scientific. On the other hand, this type of knowledge should be freely accessible to patients. So that is the balance we are right now, to trying to find out a best solution that it can be freely, it can be free of charge for everybody, all the patients at least. So, but that's always the balance, I think.
Yeah, fingers crossed that there are some volunteers to sponsor these very important knowledge sharing platforms. Why is it so important that patients with MS take part in rehabilitation studies? I asked that question because I really think it's important that we as a community understand that study is so important. But please give your vote for it.
Well, I think, of course, you can set up projects that patients do not really find interest in, and I think that's also back to the discussion about patient involvement. That's also the issue there. So that if you actually had involved patients, then you could find out whether it's of need or not. But of course, we are. If you work as a researcher, you are completely dependent on patient involvement in these type of studies. And I think one thing is that you, as a patient, you can actually gain some knowledge from these studies for yourself. So you can normally, when we do research studies, we always provide feedback to each individual that participate, that are individual. But in addition to that, you also help support how future patients should get access to rehabilitation. And if we talk about MS, of course, more and more is happening in terms of let's say progressive MS and medication. But still, it's not very it's not a normal procedure right now. So there's a lot of patients that actually only has rehab to rely on, and I think that is one important issue to also take notice of, and especially if you progress more into the disease as it is right now. Yes, there may be a shift in how the medications are used more in the progressive phases as well, or when you've had it for many years. But just as an example, the patients that attend the Danish MS rehab hospitals in Denmark, well, half of them are not using medication. So what do they have left? If you cannot, so that I'm just saying here that medication and rehab should go hand in hand.
Absolutely,
because it cannot stand alone. And at some point, you only have the rehab left. or you only have the rehab left if you don't respond very well to the medication or you have side effects and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of arguments for a patient to go into the research studies. And of course, it's always a priority of time. I think sometimes it's also it can be time consuming to participate. Of course it can. You invest your time in it as well. And sometimes you don't really see the results yourself after 5 years. So that can be a difficult aspect to grasp. I think that's also difficult for researchers to grasp sometimes, that you have to wait so many years. But I think there's a lot of, we really need the patients to go into the studies for us to achieve the best knowledge that we can possibly do, all with the goal of improving different aspects of rehab for MS patients.
Yeah, and I myself, I mean, I join lots of studies which are all non-medicational studies. And I always find it interesting when I see, let's say, myself compared to a while before. And of course, for progressive status, it might be that it's not going worse. Maybe it's not always the point that you are improving, because it's maybe not possible at that point of disease stage. But if I see some data for myself, that's also one thing where I say, okay, yeah, I keep in that study, even though it takes me quite some time, because I see some effect. And
no, I fully agree. And I think the aspect you mentioned about that is not necessarily about improvement, but it's about preservation. and if we talk about the aging research area that I was in, it was also about, if you look at a 10-year perspective, it's not about improvement, it's about preservation. So having the best possible preservation of your bodily systems, your different functions, and your ability to interact with the society and friends and family. So of course that's one issue, and and I think the ideal situation would be that you could actually do some sort of a large standardized test battery every second year or 5 year, because then you have the reference values for yourself across different topics. It could be cognitive function, it could be physical function, it could be fatigue, it could be, but if you don't have these individual values for yourself, it's difficult to track back.
Yep.
MS patients or all other persons, I think very few can actually remember exactly how it was 1 year ago.
Absolutely.
So I can barely remember what I did yesterday. So it's good to have these reference points that you can bring out, and I think that's where the medication field is very strong, and I think that's where the rehab field can really improve a lot. But it then we're back to funding. It's all about funding, because there's a lot of interest in doing these studies, but it's quite challenging to get funding for a 5-year or a 10-year longitudinal study in, let's say, 5,000 MS patients, unless you have some sort of a monetary payoff at the end.
Yeah. The governments should look into how costly it is to not offer good rehabilitation for the patients, because if you can't work anymore, and that happens quite often for MS patients on cognitive stuff, and cognitive is always related to mobility as well, in a way, because if you train yourself, you can train your cognitive issues. Ulrich pointed that out quite good, and I hopefully get somebody on the CogX study, which is now finalized, I think, and very interesting, where you see the interaction of mobility and cognition. It would be so good if our governments realize
exactly, and
they can save so much money.
And I think also the researchers, they need to do the hard work and do these studies. And I think a lot of researchers, I'm not pointing fingers, it's just as well myself, I'm criticizing here, that we also need to do the tough studies. We need to set them out. We need to use a lot of years applying money, and then let's say we can do a large study where we try to understand how can people actually maintain work-life balance as best as possible. I think a lot of MS patients would actually like to keep working.
Absolutely.
In a it may be
maybe a bit less, but yes,
in an adjusted setting, fine. But that may mean that they can work 15 years more.
Yep.
And I think if you look at that from a money perspective, there's a lot of money to gain from that from the societies, and a lot of quality of life for the patients, because as humans, work is just an integral part of being human for almost all of us. So so I think the vocational rehabilitation area that is quite interesting to follow in the coming years, because I think that there's going to be some of these studies being done. Yeah. So hopefully, at least.
Hopefully, yes. As our population is growing older, maybe it becomes more interesting. Governments don't always look for the let's have happy citizens, but when it comes to money, they get interested. I'm a bit mean.
No, but there should be all the other arguments, of course. Quality of life could be one aspect, and at most rehab site settings, quality of life is some sort of an ultimate goal, I think. And I think that's also, if we talk about some of the major studies that may be needed in, let's say, a RIMS setting or in a RIMS perspective, I think some of these large multidisciplinary rehabilitation studies where you really do what, you try to do an intervention that represents what is being done in the real world. These type of studies are needed, but they are extremely complex to run and they are quite expensive. So we're back to so you need to do long-term studies, like 1 year, 2 years or more, and you need to have large samples, and you need to have a quite detailed description of whatever rehab you're doing. Because let's say you have 10 patients, then in theory they will receive 10 different versions of rehab. Some will have cognitive rehabilitation, some will have speech therapy, and but I think that to do these like real life setting studies that would really move the field forward.
Absolutely. So let's come to one question I'm more or less asking everybody: which breakthrough in research or treatment for people living with MS would you like to see in the next 5 years?
Good question. I think actually some of the aspects about work-life balance that will really move stuff ahead in terms of not just when MS patients are in rehab settings, but also when they're in their everyday life. So I think that would be something that could really move ahead. As in relation to my background as an exercise physiologist, I would really like to see. I think Ulrik may have mentioned some of the same stuff, but we would really like to do like large scale studies where you do interventions for 5 years, for instance, in 400 MS patients, and look at how the nervous system adapts. So really trying to see the disease modifying potential of exercise, just as you can do with the medication in the large medical studies where you follow patients for 5 years or in 400 or 1,000 patients. But it requires a lot of money, and but of course we know that exercise works in terms of physical function. But if we can also link it up to that it actually has disease modifying effects, then we are really getting somewhere. I think there's a lot of shared knowledge with Parkinson or Alzheimer's, so it's the same type of studies that are needed. And if we do one study in MS, it could also set an example on how to do it in other neurodegenerative disorders. So I think these are, from a rehab perspective, I think the vocational rehabilitation in a long term could be quite interesting. That would be really a breakthrough, I think. And the other one in the exercise field is more still, can we actually do disease modification through exercise?
Yeah. And it can be very joyful, and you can find new friends. So some additional positive effects for life if you do exercise and, I don't know, play badminton, going for walking, whatever, do wheelchair rugby, whatever, I don't know.
No, exactly. And I think also the beneficial effects on the mood, the mental health, there's so much potential, and we need studies that are targeting that as the primary aim of the studies. Right now, it's mostly secondary outcomes. It's a secondary story in the different studies. But I think that is one area that we can really push push forward as well in terms of exercise. And as you say, I think the modality doesn't really matter. Whatever, if you find motivation for doing resistance training or outdoor walking or yoga, that doesn't really matter as long as it actually has some beneficial effects. And of course, motivation, if you want to have people doing, physical activity or exercise on a permanent basis, you should find something that motivates them.
Yeah.
So one thing is that we as researchers can say, okay, you need to do resistance training for these reasons, yes. But if you don't really find it motivating, then we have a lot of other options to go for. So I think that is also that could also be an example of a real life study, real life setting study where actually you just monitor whatever exercise modality that people actually prefer, and to see what are the long-term effects of this. And then you can understand, okay, if you do yoga, then you have these benefits. If you do resistance training, you have these benefits. But these like head-to-head studies of different modalities are also lacking extremely much.
Yeah. Okay, so now we talked a lot about RIMS. How and where can interested people follow your research activities and all or everything RIMS does?
Yeah, well, of course, we have the RIMS webpage called eurims.org. That's one place you can see some of the information. We also have a Twitter or X account, X Twitter account, where you can follow the RIMS organization. And we try to post a lot of information about the meetings, the SIG meetings, the webinars, and whatever we are doing. We have a LinkedIn profile as well. The informations on LinkedIn and X are overlapping. Some of them are the same, but these are the platforms that we try to communicate on. So you can easily follow us there. And myself, I also have I also have a LinkedIn profile and an X profile if you want to follow what I'm doing specifically. But the RIMS you should go to. You can go to the webpage, and then you can. There's a link in the top left corner where you can click on the Twitter X or the LinkedIn logo.
And I will put all of them in the show notes and, of course, in the corresponding blog article. And just the last question, is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners?
No, but I think this is the podcast like this is actually quite important because you actually target the audience that is the key audience. These are the patients, of course. But, of course, it could also be researchers and practitioners do all they can to help to try to do research or practical stuff that are of benefit to MS patients. So I think the dialogue between researchers, practitioners, and patients is the key to advance even more in the coming years.
Yes.
So this is one platform that is perfect for that setting, I would say.
Yeah.
So thank you for inviting me, Nele.
And thank you for being here and giving us an inside view. And of course, thank you to, as I said before, to the complete community who is putting so much spare time into improving our lives. So thanks a lot to everybody. And I'm pretty sure I will try to grasp some of your colleagues to get them on dedicated interviews on the dedicated SIG topics. And yeah.
Perfect. I'm sure they are willing to participate.
I'm sure they have to. I'm so charming. They can't withstand. No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Nele.
Bye-bye, Lars. I hope you enjoyed the interview and learned something new. I think rehabilitation is really such an important topic, and it's great that there is an initiative that is coming from Europe, but spreading over the whole world, and with some cooperation with all different types of countries. And I think I will try to catch on a few more other interview partners to talk about the different special interest groups. By the way, next time I will talk to Maria Sospleda about unlocking the nutritional code for MS, exploring the Neurant project. Very interesting topic. As you know, I guess, nutrition is really important and it can help a lot to calm down the autoimmunity. And of course, when you do it a different way and you don't eat healthy, it can push it. So Very important thing. And there is a great platform, that Neuron platform, and we talk about it, and we talk about what you can find there, and all the additional content that is available. The basic content is all for free, but there's additional content as well. And yes, it's absolutely worthwhile listening to that interview, and I hope you tune in again. So, see you next time. Thank you for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You may also be interested in the previously published episodes and posts, which you can find at ms-perspektive.com/podcast. Perspective with a K. You can also get a free PDF with 11 tips for your positive impact on MS at ms-perspektive.com/newsletter. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach me at nele@ms-perspektive.com or on social media. See you next time.